So welcome back, episode 4. I have Mina Demian with me. He runs GrantEase.ai, Platform Calgary, Innovate Calgary, 300 startups plus. And so last time we talked about, basically what's the Canada focused GTM strategy like? Because again, different markets. But this time around, I think we're talking about something that we've talked about it a bit across all the previous episodes, which is basically how do you build an advisory board? Because I feel like you get the advisory board right, it flows into a ton of things: referrals, where do you network, advice on your GTM strategy, fundraising, just a ton of things. And Mina, thank you again. Thanks so much. It's been fantastic talking so far. And I'll just get straight to it because let's just get going. Is how do you even start identifying, the right advisors versus just, they've got an impressive name on, they are all around town. Because as a newcomer or as someone who's new to the community, the society, trying to build the business, it's so hard to kind of miss that and just fall into some very interesting conversations that put you in trouble or just not even help you at all. So how does someone think of that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the question. I think it's an important one. Is an advisory board an important thing to have? Why would you go about trying to go about getting an advisory board? And the way that I always describe an advisory board is that they are the truth bombs. And the reason why I call them the truth bombs is because I think Canadians in general, when you're here in Canada and you get acclimatized to this, everyone's so polite.
Yes.
You go up to anybody and you say, hey, I got this idea for this particular product. Oh my goodness, what a great product. This is fantastic. That's their immediate thing. Encouraging. Yes, this is fantastic. This is what the market really needs. The problem with that is that they're not paying.
Yeah.
And so you get false positives. And this is a huge issue. In fact, it's not just in Canada, it's in the States as well. One of the best books that I've read is called The Mom Test. And as you can tell already, basically what ends up happening is that, let's say if you've got a really great product and you want to tell your mom is always so encouraging. Yes, this is fantastic. Good for you. But is it really the truth? Your mom's always going to be the one that's going to support you on, depending on your mom. But that's, for the most part, it's going to be someone that's going to always encourage you and tap you on the back, being like, yeah, good for you. Keep going. But what you want is the truth tellers. And so that's your first idea when you kind of start to talk about your ideas to people who might be in the industry, who've already created something that you want to create. That's a really good sign. So they've created something that you want to create, and they're also pretty truthful. You've already kind of filtered out a couple of different things where you're like, okay, this person sounds really legit. Here's the biggest tell of a good advisor versus a bad advisor is the fact that they are willing to provide you with their reputation, so introductions, and say that, hey, you should meet this person. They've got a really interesting product. And if it's not at least 3 introductions, then you're probably talking to the wrong advisor. So introductions is definitely one. They're going to provide you with their reputation. So if they are high net worth individuals or someone who's really well known in the community and they put onto LinkedIn that, hey, you should pay attention to this particular person, and they kind of give the blessing, that is also a testament to a good advisor, someone who's able to open up doors or someone who's able to risk the reputation. So those are the 2 key elements of whether or not they're good advisor. That's kind of like the testing of, you're dating someone. This is a good test to say that, okay, this person's legit. In terms of payment, everyone has a different perspective on the whether or not there should be payment to an advisor. One of the things that I learned, again, I worked with around 300 startups at Platform Calgary. One of the really interesting things about the positive side of the politeness about Canadians is that not everyone's, interested in gaining access to your equity share. So if they were able to provide you with this advice and sit on your advisory board and meet on a quarterly basis, and without actually having equity and exchange, then that's the way that you should structure things and go about focusing in on ensuring that they're satisfied with your progress and you're really listening to what they have to say, and they get a lot of intrinsic motivation for providing that advice. I've known so many incredible VCs, angel investors, people who've actually accomplished incredible things in their careers, and they're not interested in, the equity share. Some people are, and that's okay. And in that scenario, you don't want to give away more than, I'd say, like 2%, probably less than that in terms of the advisory. If this is someone who's going to create a tremendous amount of value, that's what you should be looking at as a standard. And again, I'm not just making this up. This is also Wharton School. This is what I've learned from many different investors throughout my career as well. So that's kind of how you want to consider it. What you should be aware of: vanity advisors. So if you see on LinkedIn that advisor of, and then they've got a whole laundry list of their advisors on a whole bunch of organizations, you're like, how much time do they really have to advise everyone?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about that. So that's a good tell to say that maybe this is just decoration and they're not actually operators and they're going to help me close deals. So the 3 intros is really important. You've got your quarterly audit. You're going to audit them. They're going to audit you. So just to make sure that, they're either influencing deals and keeping things moving in the right direction. That's up to you to ensure that you've got a really great quarterly, audit on your advisors.
Okay.
And I think those are the major things.
Okay. All right. Cool. That works for me. I think that's really good. I love that you talk about the vanity advisors. I mean, because maybe there are people who somehow find a way to make it work. Maybe there are, but more often than not, I struggle to see how, especially in the intense world of building a business where it's like, oh, you're advising 10 companies, and like, when do you really help the 10 companies? But do you have like any questions you think, you talked about the filtering, and like, how would you approach the filtering itself? Like, any questions or any way to kind of test for that value itself? Like, do you have any approach? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the approach should be that you're going to, I'll give you the backdrop. So if you're going out to ensure that you're now going to recruit advisors, you want to consider this is also a relationship that you're going to build, because they're not going to quickly introduce you to 3 people that they already know and could potentially be deal flow. And so you want to consider the questions that you're going to ask them is like, hey, I've got this particular product and I really want to take it to market. And what I'm looking for here is for advice. And from there, you basically say, like, now that you've tested that they're not just decoration, they're going to introduce you eventually, all this kind of stuff, is now you're going to have to prove to them that you are paying attention to what they have to say. One of the interesting things is that I've sat in so many boards with startups, and they're sitting there with the startup founder asking a whole bunch of questions to the board. The board is giving them incredible insights. I've worked with people who are the director of the marketing associations, for example, and he's giving some really interesting insights into, what to do next. But the founder isn't taking notes. The founder isn't actually executing on that. So what's the likelihood of this particular, executive at a marketing firm to help this person, maybe provide them with some free pro bono opportunities or help them navigate some of the marketing components? Very unlikely, because they haven't really paid attention to that particular person's insights. So as you consider how you're going to ask questions to advisors and how to engage them, is that you really want to pay attention to the underlying message that they're trying to provide to you and action out their advice. That's not to say is that, you take all their advice and run with it, but it's at least pressure testing what they have to say and then going back to them and be like, you know what, I tried this and I really had a hard time with this. Then they know that you're serious. And by doing that, you've established trust. And that's the most important thing as you move on with this relationship. Then they're able to open up more doors. I kind of consider it the 90-day test where you're quickly trying to establish as much trust as possible with individuals. And I've seen this work tremendously well for so many of the really keen startup founders that I've worked with who are taking this very seriously. They know that these individuals could open up doors and have some really good advice. If you really consider that they're going to provide you with value, they're going to provide you value. You have to prompt them to provide that value, though, by being completely honest, complete disclosure. And this is something that Dozy, if you don't mind me kind of like riffing off for just
Yeah,
a
that's
second
okay.
too.
Yeah, that's okay.
For a lot of us who come from overseas, the mentality is you got to present yourself as this super professional. You got everything working right. All your gears are in check. Everything's perfect. That is absolute nonsense. Nobody has their stuff in check. And so in Canada, like, how is someone supposed to advise you if they don't know what's broken? And so you have to let go of that mentality, especially amongst folks who are coming from Southeast Asian countries from whom I worked with. The mentality is you are projected as this super professional person who's got everything perfected, but you got to drop that nonsense and just be like, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having all these problems going to market strategy. I don't know how much to pay my employees. I don't know what the bonus structure is. This stuff is broken. Then they can actually advise you because you've been completely truthful and honest with them. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So that's the other component of it. It's a two-way street.
Yeah, I think so. We have one more question, but I think this point you raised, I think is pretty good. And so someone might throw up I think like when you're talking about it, I think one of the what's the thing called? What's that thing called when you reject something and you forget what it is right now. But I had an opinion like, oh, but why would you feel that way? Because some people make you feel that way and they want you to be perfect. You have the burden of proof as an immigrant sometimes is way more than the burden of proof on a native. But then I said to myself that yes, there are people who will probably treat you that way, but I feel like there are also people who are very open with you. And it kind of goes back to your point about kind of auditing and testing and pressure testing and seeing who the advisor is and kind of picking advisors that you sense that they treat you as someone who's basically trying to build. Because if you don't do that, then you meet someone who says to you, oh, you need to prove yourself to me, that sort of thing. Because always saying, because I felt like when I thought, I was like, oh, that's you. You're just being a victim here by just saying, I mean, not in a bad way, but it's almost like you're just trying to find an excuse for why you're that way. But just, can you find people who allow you to be yourself? Allow you to be yourself and give you the advice you need. If they don't allow you to be yourself, then just walk away. I mean? It's easier said than done, but try and do that. Just try and do that because it doesn't help you. You're just going to fail at some point or you suffer way more than you should.
Absolutely. One of the things that I learned about the advisors that come onto your board and provide a tremendous amount of value is that they only know what you're giving them. And so if you're not truthful to yourself and not truthful to them, then the whole thing just becomes decorations and it's not actually helping anybody. So, boards are really wonderful when I see them working really well and incredibly dysfunctional when I see them going and not working really well. But it all comes down to the founder's honesty of saying, hey, this is who I am, faults and all. And that type of relationship creates a tremendous amount of trust and tremendous amount of opportunities for both people to actually benefit from. When I see you win, I win myself. And so you just kind of want to find advisors that are in it for you and you're in it for them as well.
Yeah. So the last question, do you have like an outreach template? Like if you're trying to get advice on meetings, sending to people, do you have like a Canadian focused outreach template, the one that kind of works for Canadian advisors? Or there's nothing like that? There's just you testing and trying out stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Dozy. Let's kind of walk through a hypothetical scenario where you're looking for an advisor and you're trying to do the outreach component, right? Do you send an email that's perfectly worded and say that, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm working on, I'm looking to, advisors and maybe we can have a coffee? Like, that approach is so impersonal that is most likely not going to work. But, going back to your point about the networking component of things, you don't know who you don't know. One of the really interesting things is that I'm in a room a lot of times and I'm hearing people pitch on stage and they don't know who's in the room, right? So they're on stage and they're pitching their great idea about whatnot, but they don't know one of the people sitting in this audience is a developer specifically that could help expedite the process of developing their particular product tremendously and introduce them to technical co-founders, operators, as well as market fit. And so, do I make that introduction as an advisor? Absolutely. 9 times out of 10, I will make that introduction. The only time that I won't make that introduction is when there is a lack of enthusiasm and a lack of willingness of that particular founder to put themselves out there and say that, hey, who's this person that you really want me to meet? And then I can open up the door, but they have to walk through it. The founder, a lot of times, unfortunately, whether it's the wrong time, or if it's the wrong founder, or maybe they're shy, or they've got too much pride, I don't know what it is, but I'll make that introduction 9 times out of 10, and almost always it'll come to fruition and things will go well. But you have to take that first initial step of putting yourself out there, asking for those instructions, and asking for individuals' business cards, networking, all those kind of things. So it really does require a lot of deep networking and deep research on your part, of knowing who you're talking to and who can introduce you to someone else. Like, that's the power of this whole startup ecosystem in Alberta, is that everyone's super friendly, very open, but it requires you to take that first step. And I'll give you kind of a quick story here, is that I was working with this really brilliant founder at Platform Calgary who has had a different perspective on things. He thought that when you're out there and you do a pitch event or you go to a networking event, that it's a meritocracy. And because his product is so great, people will line up to be advisors, customers, and so on and so forth. As you already know, that's not how it works. And you kind of need to understand that these things take time. These things take a little bit of networking and finessing. Your key messaging and what you're asking for has to be clear. Those are the kind of things that you learn over time. And yes, it requires time. It requires a lot of effort. But as I said, I think it was episode 2, is that famous quote by the famous painter, is that, God will sell you anything at the price of labor.
Yeah.
And so if you put in the time, you put in the effort, it'll happen. It will happen.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, that quote was so it's hilarious and so true, because it just kind of reminds you about, you just have to do the work. There's no shortcut. You just have to do the work. And if you don't do the work and kind of get away with it, at some point it catches up with you. It always does. Variance never lies. At some point, everything just kind of matches, and then either you come collapsing or you blow up. It just kind of depends. I think that's probably where we end this. But thank you so much. Thanks, man.
It was such a pleasure. It was so fun having these conversations. I'm really happy that I'm providing as much value as I can, for sure.
Same here, honestly, same here. You've gotten to the end of episode 4, and that's great, honestly. And we're going to the last episode, which is the final one. And there, Mina is talking about how to build systems and processes that help you grow. A couple of things that I'm going to be asking him is, what are the basic tools, software that he thinks someone needs to start with when building? Maintaining culture while growing fast. Operational mistakes that he sees that kills startups, and what systems does he think every startup needs to have in place before they start saying, I want to grow faster, I want to grow to employee number 5. See you there, folks.